Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tavern Adjacent. Thank you so much for joining me on our chill D&D podcast, where we talk all things D&D, mostly dramatic stuff, but we talk about some nice stuff too. And I answer some of your voicemails about your own D&D. Whoa, today we only have one talking point, and then we'll get into voicemails. We're talking about D&D's biggest drama queen, Satine Phoenix. Sorry if I seemed a little bit distracted in that intro. I was getting another spam call, this time right as I'm starting the episode. Brilliant. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Satine Phoenix, and don't worry, I'll explain everything if you don't know who that is. And then we'll get into your voicemails and helping you guys out to make your D&D games even better. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So Satine Phoenix. Who is this person? Satine Phoenix was a D&D influencer. She had a pretty prolific presence on platforms like Twitter and Instagram. She worked with Geek and Sundry. She did the DM Tips series with them. She worked with Realmsmith. She worked with D&D in a Castle. She was pretty popular there as well. She had also a pretty prolific solo career where she did these luxury D&D games in mansions and on cruise ships. Very similar to D&D in a Castle, but centered specifically around her and also her husband, I assume, Jameson Stone. We will talk about him as well, don't worry. And also she had a very successful Kickstarter with a $300,000 raised. It was called Sirens, Battle of the Bards, with her on the front cover. Basically, she had a very prolific career. Like, that's not everything she's ever done, but those are the most major things that came to the top of my mind. She had a lot going for her, up until the summer of this year, when a tattoo artist named Chad, of course, published a statement that essentially, boiling it down, because this is all old news, published a statement where he essentially exposed Satine for being very toxic and manipulative during a job he did for her and her husband. He was doing tattoos for them, and some of their interactions went pretty bad. And Satine acted very toxic, manipulative, not great. He had, like, text messages and receipts and everything, and it was very unflattering towards her, let's just say that. It got a lot of traction, like a lot of people resonated with this, tons of, attention, retweets, responses from influencers who had worked with Satine previously. It was a lot. And that was just the first wave, I'm saying. And all of this led to a lot more testimonies coming out. This wasn't just one guy. Like, the Chad the tattoo artist was pretty popular already on Twitter, on social media, because he had done tattoos for Post Malone, so he had a name for himself already. But him saying his piece caused a lot of other people to say their piece. Both employees, employers of Satine, friends, co-workers, former friends and co-workers, I should say, a lot of the time. Almost every single one of her projects that her and her husband had worked on was bombarded by testimonies of mismanagement and toxicity, and worst of all, manipulation from Satine and her husband Jameson. It was rough. Brian Foster did live streams where he talked about this with some of the alleged, of course, victims, where he allowed them to say their piece. And some of the testimonies, while none of them were like super terribly awful bad, like Arcanum levels of holy hell, how did this even happen? I think the fact that it was a little bit, I don't want to say mundane, because that's kind of downplaying it. It was bad. What Satine, being toxic and being manipulative, those are really bad things. But the thing about Satine versus someone like Arcanum is, with Satine, everyone has experienced that. Everyone has experienced that toxic, higher than thou, thinks they're better than you, coworker or boss or even teacher, and we all hate it. And we all hate it so much, because we've all experienced that at some point. And I think that level of understanding is what really drove people, because this compelled a lot of people. A lot of people really did not like Satine and her husband Jameson at this point. Jameson released a really bad response early, blaming some mental health issues on his part for his behavior, which, whether or not you think that's true, doesn't really matter, because no one really believed him, and the response to his apology was pretty much universally negative. And then Satine herself, a lot of this controversy was centered around, she put out an Instagram Live apology. Now, if that sounds wrong to you, congratulations, you're smarter than Satine. Live and apology, in my opinion, should never go in the same sentence, other than live apologies are stupid, don't do them. Because you need a few takes. You're probably going to need a few takes to get this really right. And even if you want to appear genuine by doing it live and in front of the people, you're just going to be distracted, probably because chat's going to be yelling at you the whole time. I actually watched it live, and I was appalled and shocked and horrified by how bad it was. It was so bad. It was really, truly horrendous. She also only apologized to, I believe a fraction of the people who came out against her, which I suppose it's kind of reasonable considering so many people came out against her. I don't think she had time to talk about all of them. It was really rough. After that, Satine and her husband kind of did the thing, and by the thing, I mean they vanished from the internet. They vanished from Twitter. They, let their Instagram stay inactive. Their active projects were kind of delayed. And by kind of delayed, I mean they were delayed. Like Science Battle of the Bards didn't really receive many updates. It was already delayed at this point. It was supposed to, the estimated release date, I should say, during the Kickstarter period, while they were raising money, the estimated release date was, I believe, December of 2021. And obviously, this whole thing happened in 2022. So very reasonable that, by this point, people kind of expected a delay. And after all this came out, people expected to delay even more. But don't worry, we'll get into that further. And also, her Satine's Quest business I don't think it went dormant, because there still appears to be, I looked on their website, there still appeared to be events that happened during this time, but her social media was no longer promoting Satine's Quest, that's the name of the luxury D&D game thing, actively anymore. So basically, she was dormant. And that should be the end of the story. An influencer in a relatively niche business, because even though D&D is really, really, really dummy popular, it's important to remember that at the end of the day, this isn't Star Wars that we're talking about here. This is Dungeons and Dragons, and in terms of the entire world, D&D is a relatively niche brand. It's big, but not, it's not Star Wars, it's not Marvel, etc. An influencer in that brand messes up big time, gets exposed, she's dropped by a lot of her contacts, and that's that. There's also some legal drama with her, though I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know enough about it, and also I could get sued if I get something wrong. So let's not talk about the legal drama that she's involved in, but yeah, there's some legal drama too that may or may not be resolved at this point. It's not really something that is being talked about online, though during this whole thing it was a bit more of a big deal. So yeah, there you go, that's the end of the story, right? Well, no, obviously not, because I'm talking about this. In September of this year, Satine made her grand return. And by grand return, I mean she took a few months off, a couple months off, and then she popped back onto her Instagram with a post talking about mental health and forgiveness and all that good stuff. Now, in case you're wondering, wow, that's a really brief break. You're right. It was a really brief break. This whole thing happened in the summer, and then she immediately returned in the autumn. She didn't skip a beat. She came right back. And that set a fair few people off. But what's really interesting is, I'm going to be honest with you guys, not a lot of people noticed when Satine came back, and that's why I didn't talk about it in September. I didn't bring it up or make any jokes about it. I was kind of going to, maybe during an RPG horror story intro, make a joke about it, but I was like, no one's paying attention to this. It's not really affecting anybody. Why talk about it? It's having a bit more of an effect now, which is why I'm talking about it now, because, again, this continues. But yeah, in September, she made a return. And basically every few days, she would post a post on Instagram with a photograph, at first uncredited to the photographer, but after people yelled at her about it, she eventually started crediting people for the photographs. But yeah, anyway, point is, each post would have a message about mental health and forgiveness and, basically vague posting about her cancellation. Which, look, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I think it's really important to talk about mental health. And I think that anybody should be allowed to give their piece about their own mental health and their own mental struggles. That's really important. At the same time, it's impossible to ignore the fact that Satine has just lost her career in many ways. A lot of people are angry with her. And then she comes back with posts talking about the importance of mental health and forgiveness and moving on. Kind of contrived. Just a tad. But at the same time, it's not really hurting anybody, although I'm sure it's not helping the people that she manipulated and the people whose mental health she harmed, allegedly, of course. And yeah, it's not great. But, again, not directly hurting anyone. So throughout September and October, she's making these posts talking about mental health and all that lovely stuff, eventually culminating in a very personal and I think very important piece about some struggles she went as a child. I'm not going to go into detail because I think YouTube would strike me down immediately, but let's just say that it was some really serious stuff. And I do not want to make light of that stuff because it's really serious. And again, I genuinely applaud Satine for talking about these things because these issues, they affect a lot of us. And a lot of people, I should say, don't like talking about that sort of thing, that sort of childhood trauma. And it's really important for people. I think even though it's really hard, I think it's important for us to all come to terms with that kind of thing, talk about it, and bring awareness to it because that is important. But like I said at the previous point, it seems really contrived when it's happening immediately after Satine gets in a whole lot of trouble for exploiting and hurting other people's mental health. It's impossible to separate those two things. And even if Satine, let's give her the benefit of the doubt, even if she had the noblest intentions in mind with this, it comes off as very contrived, and some even saw it as very manipulative. And her comments reflected that. They were not very generous towards her. But eventually, all things pass with time, and eventually these posts ended. They ended with that very serious post I mentioned before, and went on to just, posting about her family, posting about what she's doing for the holidays, all that good stuff. That's awesome. But then, it's not awesome. It's just kind of average. But it's better than allegedly exploiting mental health for as an opportunity to get back your career. At least that's what a lot of people thought. It's better than that, But at the very least, that she's doing that for about a month, and then recently, in November, heading into the winter period, she started posting about Satine's Quest and updating about her Kickstarter. And here's where we get to the fun stuff, because now Satine is trying to rebuild her career. She is back to her old businesses and, back to trying to essentially make money in this industry. Not to knock someone for trying to make money in this industry. I make money in this industry, and I'm not about to, bash her for that because, you need money to live. So, yeah. Anyway, point is, she's back to her businesses. Satine's Quest has returned, and they're doing a Wentworth Mansion event in January. What's really, really funny and fascinating to me is that I went to their website to check the ticket price because I wanted to talk about the ticket price on this podcast. The Shopify link to purchase tickets was down, and the reason it's down is because the period for purchasing tickets is over, which would be normal, but the thing is, on the top of her website, it says, tickets available right now, and it says, sign up right now for your dream vacation, play D&D with Satine Phoenix at Wentworth Mansion, which is the 8th best hotel in the United States. But yeah, even though all that is all over her website, the ticket link is down because the period is over. They haven't even bothered to take those advertisements off of her site, which I think is kind of funny. On top of that, there was an event that already went down in December. I do think it's a little bit of a mismanaged move to continue to advertise an event whose ticketing is closed, but yeah, there you go. That's back. So Satine has brought back her Satine's Quest experience. As far as I know, the cruise ship aspect of that business is no longer an option for her. You can sign up for updates on the next Satine's Quest cruise, but as of right now, there is no news about that happening, likely because the partners that she worked with, or at least some of the people she worked with for the cruise ship portion of that business, were some of the people who spoke out against her during that whole debacle on social media. So, yeah, that's not looking great for her. Now, as for the Kickstarter, the one she raised $300,000 for, the Kickstarter was dormant for a very long period of time, though has made a return. An update was posted in December, written by her husband, Jameson Stone, who, by the way, allegedly acted just as badly, if not worse than her, which is wonderful, amazing, great. But yeah, he posted an update on the Kickstarter to essentially say, hey guys, we're still working on this, but there are obviously some delays. So how long is this thing delayed? We were aiming for a 2021 release date originally. That's where they estimate the delivery of the PDF of the book, not the physical copies, the PDF. So the PDF is now estimated to be delivered in January of 2024. From December of 2021 to December of 2023 to January of 2024. Yikes. That is rough. There is a few playtest materials that are available inside of the update. However, all of these playtest materials are old. They all come from the Discord, and they were simply moved into the Kickstarter. They were not trying to conceal that, seemingly. They were public about it, at least during the post that I read. Though that did not ease the minds of their Kickstarter backers who pledged literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring this book to life. A delay of 3 years is pretty rough for a PDF, especially since some of the people who spoke out against Satine and Jameson during that whole social media debacle were some of the people who worked on this book, so I'm sure that didn't put a strain on the team in any way. One of the commenters alleged and said that it's cute. They thought it was cute that Satine and Jameson are still pretending to have a team working on the book. I do not know whether or not that random commenter, whether or not their guess is accurate, though I will say that huge controversies like that break out on social media, especially when some of the team members are part of that controversy or are part of driving that message forward, it can really split the team and it can make projects a lot harder to complete. So all in all, it's looking rough for Satine. Why am I talking about this? Well, because this isn't the first time I've seen this in the D&D community. In the D&D community, we've seen some controversies, and we've seen some people try to bounce back from it. We saw Arcadum, who in my opinion was way worse than Satine, try to bounce back from his controversy. He's still streaming on Twitch, or at least he was up until a month ago. I just checked his YouTube, and he hasn't uploaded in a month, so I don't know how that's going for him. But the point is, his online profiles are like a graveyard at this point. He's streaming to literally a fraction of his audience, because when you mess up like that, again, in a relatively, I stress, niche industry, people tend to really not like you. Satine and Arcadum are both people who clearly thought they were kind of a big deal. Satine threw her weight around a lot, threatened people a lot with her social media presence, using her influence to bring down people. I believe Jameson's words were, "I can take someone down with a single tweet." That was her husband. And look, at the end of the day, that is not true. Satine and Jameson weren't the hot stuff. And that's clearly showcased by their inability to bring back their career, and also showcases the level of immaturity. Look, when you mess up like that, the first step should be to properly apologize. And in case I didn't make it clear by saying her Instagram live apology was a joke and a train wreck, at least I said that on Twitter. I don't know if I said that in this podcast. But yeah, her Instagram live apology was a joke and a train wreck. It was really, really bad. His published apology wasn't even a video. It was like a text document published to his social medias blaming mental health for his toxic, treating of other people. Those are terrible apologies. God awful. They were doing nothing for them. And their inability to move on from this is just showcasing the fact that apologizing, and a good apology, is the first damn step. You have to start by rebuilding people's trust in you. And that trust is not here. Just look at the comments on that. Well, I mean, I'm not going to make you do it. But if you look at the comments on that Kickstarter update, they have a lot of backers. Thousands of people pledge to try and make this project happen. They believe that this project could be great. And then that belief was crushed. And that really sucks. Rebuilding that trust is hard, and Satine and Jameson didn't put the work in. A few Instagram posts talking about mental health and forgiveness do not build people's trust back in you. And now that Satine is back trying to rebuild his business, trying to make the Kickstarter still happen, trying to make Satine's quest still happen, we're just looking at a business that just seems mismanaged, a business that can't seem to move past its controversy. Not, in my opinion, simply can't move past its controversy. Whether or not you think it's right, whether or not you think it's proper, whether or not Satine should be allowed to move past this or shouldn't be allowed to move past this, to me that doesn't matter. To me, what I'm looking at is somebody who just can't move past it, whether or not they're justified in doing so or not. It's rough. It's really, really rough. if Satine and Jameson are somehow watching this, I mean, look, I don't wish any ill will upon you or your family by any means. And really, I don't really wish demise or downfall on anybody, but I mean, their inability to move past this is just clear illustration of the fact that they may not deserve the position that they had. It's bad. The controversy itself may not have been the level of someone like the Spoony one or someone who's covered by a guy like The Right Opinion, right? But again, people are really moved when they see someone who's acting toxic and manipulative because, again, we've all seen that. We've all experienced that. And none of us like it. Especially in an industry, in a community that can be pretty tight-knit. So yeah, it's looking pretty rough for Satine. I haven't really seen much people talking about this, mostly because it's been pretty low on the radar and the profile, but I thought it was an interesting case study in a creator who's trying to bring back a career that at this point in time is kind of, I mean, from my perspective, outside looking in, of course, not the perfect perspective, not going so well. So, yeah, there you go. I don't know if I'm going to talk about this again. Just a, sort of an interesting case study to talk about on the pod. But yeah, there you go. There's Satine Phoenix. Wonder what she's gonna do next. But without further ado, guys, let's help you guys out with some voicemails.
Hi, so I had this player who so it was his first time ever playing. He's a first time player. And I've been DMing for this group for about 7 or 8 months now. And at first, he comes to all the sessions. He would play along for the first couple of sessions, and then he kind of just stopped playing. There was a running joke that there was like his special distance where when we talked about party order, he'd be 40 feet away from everyone else. Spent most of the sessions on his phone. Didn't really pay attention. Didn't really seem to care. But then he would talk about how amazing the session was and how great it was and all this stuff. Flash forward to 2 months ago, he asked if he could retire his character and make a new one. I told him that was fine. But then he kind of stopped showing up consistently. He would still come, but wouldn't play, doesn't have a new character, doesn't seem interested in starting a new character yet, but will just kind of come to the sessions and play on his phone and then talk about how he wishes he was playing, but never actually engage with the group. And I've told him before, oh, if you don't want to play, you don't have to, it's okay, you can just hang out. And he's like, no, I want to play. And so, I guess just advice, how would you handle that? What would you do in that situation? But yeah, thanks. Love the vids.
Thank you too for watching the vids. Okay, so at the baseline, guys, if you want to play D&D, you need to play D&D. You need to engage with the game. And I think it's neat that he's just there, but honestly, I mean, personally, I would find it kind of distracting having a dude who's just I don't know, playing geometry. Oh, gee. Something. Sorry, I would find it very distracting if there was just a dude playing Geometry Dash on his phone while we're all trying to play Dungeons & Dragons, even if the volume's down. It's just kind of weird having some dude at the table there who's just kind of phased out. And even if they say they enjoy the game, I do think that level of non-engagement does affect the rest of the group. Personally, I struggle to DM if I know somebody's not being engaged. This is even worse if they're supposed to be playing. The fact that they were playing at your table and not engaging with the story, I mean, it's great that they're having fun. That's awesome. But if that's affecting the rest of the group and affecting the DM in a negative way, I think that is a serious thing that needs to be talked about. It's very interesting and weird that they show up to the tables, complain about not being able to play because they don't have a character, but never put the effort in to make a character and actually play. I think that isn't necessarily problem player behavior. They're not a bad person for doing that, but it does show a level of, look, I don't want to say selfishness just because that sounds really bad, but a level of carelessness, I'll say, towards the actual effort that it takes to play D&D. At the bare minimum, you need to make a character and you need to play the game. That's what it requires to play Dungeons & Dragons. It's not just a social contract, it's just the bare minimum requirement. You need a character to play, and that's it. I don't know if this person is expecting you to make a character for them, but I think that's an unrealistic expectation. You need to tell them, look, if you want to engage in the game, you need to engage in the game. You can't just sit there and play on your phone. If you want to play, you need to make a character and you need to make an effort to be a part of the group. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. You don't need to develop an accent and a huge sprawling backstory. But at the very least, if you want to play D&D, you need to play D&D. You need to actually sit at the table, make a character, and engage with the game on a level that's appropriate for the group. I don't know your group. I don't know how in-depth you are with the way that you play. But to me, it's always really important to have players who are willing to engage with my game and willing to interact with characters and willing to, at the very least, make a character. Like, I still can't believe that this guy is out here going like, oh man, I really wish I can play. If only I had a character. Where it's 100% within their power to make a character and play the game. So yeah, even though this guy is not, in my opinion, like a bad person, I do think that that level of non-engagement does affect the rest of the group in a negative way, at least in my experience, and shows a level of carelessness towards the degree of, like, they need to, at the very least, make a character to play the game. So yeah, there you go. Have a conversation with this guy. Tell them that they need to put a little bit of backbone into playing if they want to play. And if they can't do that, well, unfortunately, they're just not going to be able to play the game. If you're comfortable with having them at the table, still playing Clash Royale on their phone, then that's great for them. You know, I wish them best of luck with that. But if they want to play D&D, they got to get up and actually play.
Hey, I've got to make this a bit quick, 90-second time limit and all that. Beforehand, Crispy, love your content. You kind of introduced me to D&D a bit, but now on to what I'm talking about. I, as a player and a DM, I'm in a group with a bunch of people. However, there is one player who I have to preface is not a problem player, just I have a bit of an issue with them. Being that in the 3 games that I've played with them, they have made basically the exact same character 3 different times. Being the very generic sort of stoic badass who loves magic items, is really charismatic, and is kind of bland. And it's like, they enjoy themselves, the group enjoys themselves, and I know as a DM, if the group's enjoying it and everyone's happy, then no worries. It's just, I have a little issue with it where it feels like the character itself is not unique to this game and could easily be just plopped somewhere else. And it kind of, on like a meta sense, is really generic. And like, that it sucks on a meta level. And I don't know. I'm wondering here, am I crazy for thinking this? Because it's like, I don't know.
All right. So I don't think you're crazy. There are definitely times where I feel like players don't put a lot into their characters. All of my players in my home game, they don't roleplay a lot. Like, that's why when I'm playing streamed, there's a lot of roleplaying in those games, even if it is a really, like, even though I'm a really combat-focused DM, like, in my prep, I prep a lot of combat stuff. That's why I revel so much in roleplay, just because my players in my home game don't roleplay a lot. They usually just roleplay themselves as their characters, which is fine. That's exactly what I expect from them. I expect nothing more from them, and that's awesome. That's totally valid. But this player is not putting much in their character, and clearly at your table, there's a bit more of an expectation to do more, at least an expectation from you. They also do the same character over and over and over again. I won't say that the stoic badass is bad. I don't think that that's a bad character. Like, there are plenty of stoic badasses that I really, really like Arya Stark and the Hound come to mind immediately. Those are both really stoic characters who are also pretty badass, and those are great characters. I don't think that trope is inherently bad, but if you're going to do it over and over and over again, I do understand that it can get a little bit repetitive. From a DM standpoint, I like getting invested in player characters. I want to love my player characters. If I don't love my player characters, it's really hard for me to, prep sessions around them, because if I don't care about the player characters, why do I care about this, why do I care about this game? They're the main characters. If I don't like them, then the whole thing kind of falls apart a little bit, doesn't it? So I feel like you're running into that issue. At the same time, though, like you said, if the whole group likes this character and this player is having fun, I think it is worth talking to them about, but don't kick them out of the group for this. Like, certainly not that. You didn't imply that you were going to, but I do think that this isn't like a huge deal to the point where it needs to be solved immediately, right? Like, no huge measures need to be taken to fix this. Even though, as a DM, I do empathize with you on this level, if they're not going to engage with the game on the level that you want them to, and if they're not making characters that you enjoy, I do empathize with your struggle to prep a game and arcs around that character. Talk to the player and tell them this. Tell them, like, look, I think that your character's really fun, but they are the same as you've done previously, and I'm struggling to build stories around them. Can you build a little bit more around this character? Like I said before, like what you said, they are the stoic badass. There's so much you can do with that. Like, even though, like, here, we'll take the example I just said. Arya and the Hound are two different characters from the Song of Ice and Fire, and even though they're both stoic badasses, they're both very different characters. They're not the same person, right? They bounce off each other really well in the show and in the books, but they are not the same character because there are notable differences. When you expand a character, you can go way beyond the trope. You can take the stoic badass in multiple different ways and make 3 different stoic badasses that are completely different in terms of their character and are interesting in different ways. Ask them if they can expand the character, and if you have ideas as the dungeon master, give those ideas to them, especially if they are more inexperienced, Like, generally, the characters in my home game, like I said, there's not a lot of role-playing, and at the same token, there's not a lot of backstory, honestly. Like, the characters are very, very down to basics of the character, in terms of character building. Like, maybe a paragraph, maybe even less than that, Eska and Desna are 2 Air Genasi siblings who just spend their time wandering around the world and exploring. That's it. They're 2 siblings that like exploring stuff. They have 2 different skill sets. Desna uses magic with monk skills, and Eska is a rogue who's good with a sword. That's it. That's the summary of it. That's all that there is. So I build up their characters during the story, and I get their help with that. Desna has a lot of Destiny references and connections, so I build those into the story, some subtle stuff that only he would get because he's the only one who played the game other than me. And he really enjoys that sort of stuff. Like, I don't mind putting in some references to a little property and a game that he really enjoys that he built his character to reference. That's okay with me. And Eska, she wanted a bad guy. I gave her one. I gave her a really compelling bad guy in the form of an avatar of Vecna, a piece of Vecna that she is really invested in. Her rivalry with that character, her hatred of that character has really built up her character. These started as very, very basic characters that have expanded a little bit by me working with the players to do so. So yeah, I recommend doing that. If you want this character to be expanded, this player doesn't need to change them away from the stoic badass because, again, I think that's a valid trope, But I understand that there's not a lot to do with it if it's just, if the player doesn't expand it more. Help them to expand it. If they don't want to do that, though, if they are very like, no, I want to stay in this zone and not do anything about it, I think that's weird. Most players are okay with expanding their characters. But tell them, like, look, if you don't expand the character, I will struggle to create plot hooks for your character. And that means that you won't be able to engage with the game as much. I'm worried about that happening. I totally get from a DM perspective that building plot hooks for a character you really don't care about, it's hard. It's really hard. If the player doesn't give you anything to work with, like, what are you supposed to do, So yeah, help them to build out their character if they're interested. And if they're not interested, tell them just straight up, like, look, it's okay, but you're not going to be able to engage with the game as much just because I'm going to struggle to build plot hooks around a character that isn't as expanded as the rest of the party, I hope that helps you out. It is a complicated situation, especially since the rest of the party seem to be okay with it. But you as the DM, you are also a player in this group. You're building around the story. You're building the story. And that means that your opinion really does matter. The struggle that you have with creating a story around this character, that does matter. Even if the rest of the party are okay with it, they are not building the story like you are. You have a central role in running the game. And even though, you're still a member of this group, you're an equal member of this group. You're not better than anyone else in your party. I think your opinion still does hold merit. And I think it is valid for you to, have a little bit of hesitation when it comes to building a story around this character. So I hope that helped you. And I think it's time to move on to our next one, our next voicemail.
So I have this dilemma where one of our party members got kidnapped because his player joined the military recently and he had to get shipped off. Well, the player and I have been discussing for months about me getting his primary weapon, and I had mentioned, hey, this is kind of my idea to the DM, because we were still kind of flip-flopping on it. Well, last night, one of the players, and the DM and I were just in a party chat playing games and all. And he asked, or not the DM, but the other player asked who's gonna get his weapon. And I said, me. Well, the DM said, well, you just managed to grab it, but that's most likely going to change anyway. And then the player mentioned things about, oh, the sentient being in the sword hates your god, so it's obviously not you. And it kind of hurt. I don't know what to do. I want to mention it, but at the same time, it's hard. Yeah, if you got advice, let me know. If not, well, I guess I can figure that out. Thanks, I love your videos, and just keep doing what you're doing, man. It's really one of the few things that I look forward to.
Thank you for that. Okay, so this isn't, the worst situation that we've ever seen, even on this podcast, but it is a situation that, I understand. This player told you, like, hey, your character's gonna get my magic weapon when he goes out to the military, and then all of a sudden during a video game session of all things, he's just like, nah, never mind, change my mind on that. Also, the weapon's soul hates you, so sorry. That's really annoying. I will say that at the end of the day, it is that player's weapon. And even if it was a dick move for them to change their mind on a heartbeat like that, that is their, they have that right. It is their weapon that belongs to their character, and at the end of the day, they have the freedom to choose what happens to it. And if they change their mind, maybe they made that agreement with you and then didn't realize that, hey, the soul and the weapon may have a deep problem with this deal. If they realize that later on, then I would understand that they changed their mind. Again, it's not a good move on their part. They should apologize. They should have said, like, hey, like, I understand why you wanted this, but I don't think it really makes sense for my character, and I've decided to change my mind. They have the right to do that, but they should have communicated it to you in a bit more of a mature way. At the very least said, like, hey, sorry about that, but this weapon's going to go to X person instead. Again, they have the freedom to do that, but it doesn't mean that your feelings about the situation are invalid. Should you bring it up with the DM? I don't know. I am not the DM. I'm not the other player. I don't know, like, what your relationship is with them and how you think they would respond to that. But I do think it's worth mentioning, in my opinion, from an outside looking in perspective. I think it's worth mentioning, like, hey, I think it really, like, can you explain to me, like, why you changed your mind about this weapon going to my character? Like, why did you change your mind on that? Because we had set this up before, and it feels like it happened, you changed your mind so quickly. Why did you do that? It doesn't need to be a confrontation. It's just a question. And if that helps to ease your mind, then that's great. I don't think you should try to, like, force an apology out of this person because, again, it's their character, it was their gear, and they have the freedom and the right to give it to who they think should have it if their character is being retired or is getting kidnapped or what have you. Again, I'm not saying that you're wrong in this case because absolutely this player is in the wrong, and the DM not really, asking or trying to enforce the decision that the player had made previously. That is suspicious to me. It is interesting that the DM didn't even bother, like, bringing up, like, hey, you agreed to give it to this person before. What happened? Like, again, it's their right, but they should also probably explain, like, why they changed their mind about this. Again, like I said, doesn't need to be a confrontation, but a conversation about this is valid. Your feelings on this situation, I think that the DM and the other player should hear it out, should hear you out. I said that, again, like I said before, that I am not the DM, I'm not the player. I don't know whether or not you should talk to them about that. But, personally, Crispy, I do think, I shouldn't have said that earlier. I do think you should talk to them about this. I do think that it's something that you shouldn't let bubble over, especially if the player is going to continue at the table under a different character, because you don't want this sort of thing to, like, grow, this sort of bitterness to grow, especially if under such a minor thing, a weapon going to someone else. Maybe even, you could turn it into some neat character development for both you and that player by, having a conversation about this out game and turning it into something cool in-game. Who knows? It might actually turn out to be even better than what you anticipated. Again, I do understand, like, why this would be frustrating. And I understand for that player why they would make this decision. I mean, I have my guesses as to why they changed their mind. And again, it's their right. However, It is frustrating. They should at least explain their reasoning to you, and they didn't, so a conversation should be had. Not a confrontation, a conversation, which is, in my opinion, the best way to solve this little tiff that you're having at your D&D table. I wish you best of luck, and thank you for your sweet words at the end of your voicemail. All right, and that's going to be it for today's episode of Tavern Adjacent. Thank you guys so much for coming to this episode. I will say that if I sound weird or I look weird, there's been a lot that's happened the past 2 weeks, guys. It has been really tiring, and I'm recovering. I'm doing okay. I'm pushing through, but this season has been pretty tough on me. So, yeah, if I sound tired or if I'm really rambly, sorry about that. Trying my best, but I wanted to record an episode. I want to talk about this stuff, and I hope you guys enjoyed, even if I was really drowsy during today's session. But yeah, if you guys did enjoy, despite my drowsiness, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out RPG Horror Stories, where we talk about the best of the worst of Dungeons & Dragons. While you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Phoenix Fallen to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.